You do not need another person, place, or thing to make you whole. God did that already. Your job is to know it. Beautiful words from Maya Angelou, a better leader you could not find. And yeah, she wrote her autobiography. She didn't view herself as a writer, actually. She was asked repeatedly to write, and she believed that she was meant to be singing. And she'd had a successful career doing that to that point. She started to write her autobiography, which took about 7 books, if I'm correct. And I read them one summer a number of years ago, so you really got a flavour of the early experiences that shaped her, the trauma that she experienced from a young age, and the obstacles, the challenges, the people that she met along the way to really become the person who she became. And she was fortunate to meet a number of other great leaders of that time. Their paths crossed, and she was, I think, given a telling off, actually. Can't remember if it was Martin Luther King or if it was Malcolm X. One of them gave her a telling off. Regardless, she became someone who offered great service to the world through her writing, through her teaching, and just the sheer size of her character. And yeah, what the words are saying is that you don't need anything outside of yourself to be whole, and can you really recognise that? And I wanted just to explore that thought further, because from what I can see, and as an HR professional, particularly within business, within organisations, a key challenge of us is that we have set up systems, we've set up, structures to maintain this professional image, what we deem as professional, and expecting people to put on a different hat when they walk into an organisation or a place of business. And really, it's the opposite of wholeness, it's the opposite of leadership. So let's look at that a little bit further. So on a lighter note, I was watching an episode of Selling Sunset last week. Now, in my defence, it was not so much reality TV when it first started. It was more property. It's become much more dramatic and like a reality TV show now. But there was an episode in it last week, and one of the ladies who's been in it since the start, and I like her, she's been promoted into a role where she was everyone's colleague, and then she becomes their boss, the office manager. Now, there's been a lot of drama around one of the other characters in the show, and in this episode they're on a social event, so they're not in the place of work, and basically it kicks off and they all start addressing the issues with this girl. Now, in her role as boss, she obviously understood that she did have something to say, because she also had personal issues with this person. But she obviously understood that as her role as boss, she couldn't just sit there and allow that to happen. So she stood up and she said, basically, I'll be professional in the office, and walked out of the restaurant or the bar that they were in. And really, that one sentence, it made me really stop and think, hold on a minute here. No. We are one person. We are whole. You're not one person at home and one person in the office. And that very sentence really, it just highlighted, one, she didn't handle the situation well, and second of all, she clearly is over promoted and not able to conduct herself. We are not somebody separate from home and work. And I was asked that by a leadership team a number of years ago, discussing a programme for their leadership team. Is this a way of being at home or work? And I'm like, no, that it doesn't work that way. We are one person. And this idea of professionalism, what that does is it creates an idea that there is a certain way in being that we have to act to be professional. And as I say, performance management systems, we have behaviours, we have competencies, where we are telling people what we're expecting them to behave like. Now, if this doesn't really match with who they are and what they are, then what you get is people putting on an image of a way that they have to behave and act to be accepted within the organisation, and that creates a division. So it's the opposite of wholeness. That creates people putting on an act. We get people being superficial, behaving and acting in ways because they have to be professional, but underneath it, in social events, that toxic behaviour comes out, or you get people in leadership positions who can't handle it, who'll get up and walk out of the situation rather than actually command and controlling that situation, even in a social event, to not allow somebody to be outnumbered in that manner, regardless of what the individual's done. It was not a nice way of seeing one person targeted by a group like that. So to get up and stand and walk out of the situation showed the opposite. It showed a lack of leadership, and she wasn't able to cope with that. She wasn't able to stand and to put her own feelings aside and to take on that role of leadership. So she let herself down in that situation, and we're now at the end of the season, and you can definitely see it didn't end well for any of the girls. So there really is, it's an obstacle, and it's an obstacle that you want to overcome. Now, as I say that, I can imagine the fear of, if everybody was saying and doing what they wanted to do, it would be pandemonium, and it probably would be for a little while. So there is certainly taking steps to get into where you want to go, but that level of control, that level of requiring people to behave in a certain way that's not authentic to them is also, and continuing in those old patterns also isn't the way to go about it. So yeah, it's really how do we do that? How do we get people to a place where they are actually able to integrate those parts of themselves? Okay, so being able to show up and be who they are, because what's actually better is to see and who a person is, what's coming natural to them, and then correct it along the way. So that's a far easier way of going about it than actually saying to somebody that they're expected to put on a professional hat and act professional. So we really require a shift in thinking and how we lead and manage people. The solution then is to have one solution, and not to see a person. Yes, it's, if we're managing a large team or an organisation, we start to look at the collective, but we're dealing with one person at a time. And to create various solutions, we have HR who are quite often led by leaders who are not whole, and it can be seen in the way the HR function is set up. So we have various different centres of excellence, areas of speciality, well-being, learning development, looking at leadership development, through to now diversity, and it's just becoming much more complex, and we're adding more complexity to something which is actually quite simple. I'm not saying it's easy to do, but it's actually quite simple, and it's one solution that we need. We don't need all these various agendas. We don't need to make things more difficult than what they actually are. I watched another guilty secret. Clearly watched too much television last week, but the rise and fall of Abercrombie and Fitch is a must watch in terms of what I'm talking about here, because it can be seen quite clearly the lack of wholeness and the issues that caused within the organisation. The very thing that caused the success, so creating division, creating this special, where they only recruited white, young, attractive males and females, and this was clearly popular, and they got huge, massive success from it, but they couldn't sustain it because ultimately it was divisive, and there were certain areas, certain people and groups that were excluded, and quite rightly. The lack of diversity was obvious, and it was seen by the courts. They had to settle, they had requirements to meet to satisfy the court, which they did. And what was the solution? Hire diversity professional. And actually, if you watch it, the head of diversity that they had, the show made him look quite foolish, to be perfectly honest, because you then saw it was a tick box exercise, as I say, to satisfy the core. Were they actually interested in being diverse and appealing to a wider market and not excluding people, not breaking the law? And the answer to that was no. They continued to do a lot of the same. The issue there was the lack of wholeness of the CEO. There was quite clearly a character flaw within that individual, which caused their downfall. And he exited the business. And he was also associated with other leaders at that time who were not reputable, who we later find out some of the events that went on with people that he was associated with. So there is a temptation within business right now. There is a temptation to look at challenges, to minimise risk, to doing everything we can to survive, looking at where the problems are, HR coming up with solutions to address that. But actually, what if it's just start with the CEO and make sure the CEO and the senior leadership team are coming from a place of wholeness, and then allowing that to filter down, having one solution, and actually teaching people that they can show up and be themselves. Because, you know, the issue with Abercrombie and Fitch was division. If you are whole, if you don't need another person, place, or thing to make you feel whole, if you know you're whole, then you don't exclude people. You don't you don't need diversity professionals. You don't need well-being agendas. You don't need all of these things. You don't need leadership programs. If you know you're whole, you don't exclude anybody. You are able to show up and be yourself. And you don't have to put on a performance. You don't have to be superficial. You've not only recognised that wholeness in yourself, you're able to share that wholeness with other people. So I welcome you to really have a think about that, to look at yourself first. Are you coming from a place of wholeness? Are you in a place where you are able to express this wholeness and is accepting of it? And then can you allow and those around you? Okay, so not only that, can those around you be whole and show themselves, and if necessary needed, where corrections are needed, but can you be yourself? Can you be whole, and can you allow others to be whole around you?